Hi, everyone. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Okay. Hello. Thank you for joining today's webinar on the 2024-25 FAFSA. My name is Antonia Estrada, and I'm the program coordinator at Uprooted Academy. I'd like to say, I think you should be seeing the screen. If you're not, please let me know in the chat. You should be seeing the slide that says Meet Uprooted Academy. Okay, great. Wasn't sure. Again, my name is Antonia Estrada, and I'm the program coordinator at Uprooted Academy. I'd like to say a few words about who we are before we get started. At Uprooted Academy, we want students to feel courageous, confident, and competitive when they submit their college applications. So that's why we are ruthless in our pursuit to alleviate the anxiety and confusion around the college selection and application process, including the financial aid process, and that's why we're here today. So after today's presentation, we'd love it if you could take a few minutes to fill out a quick survey. Your opinions and feedback are important to us to help us improve future workshops, to help you help your students. Finally, if you have any questions, please enter them in the Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer them if I can at the end of the presentation. So it's going to take about 40 minutes today. I tried to make it a little shorter. It's just that there's a lot of information to cover. So I'll try to go quickly without going so quickly that you don't understand me. But welcome, everyone. So what's on the agenda for today? So we're going to look at the latest updates and issues surrounding the new FAFSA, and there are many issues, which we'll talk about soon. And then we're going to look into the FSA ID, which is essentially the username and password for the studentaid.gov account. And then we're going to look at an overview of selected questions on the FAFSA form that a dependent student and their parent or parents would see, and how to complete those questions. So just selected questions that perhaps require a bit more explanation. So first of all, the new 2024-25 FAFSA form was soft launched on December 30th. On January 8th, a little over 2 weeks ago, the Department of Education announced that it had received over 1 million applications from students using the redesigned FAFSA form, and that the form would be available for students and families to access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So even though the FAFSA is online now pretty much consistently for everyone, there are still a number of issues that Federal Student Aid is working to resolve. If your students encounter these issues, if the FAFSA site is down for maintenance, which will still be happening, can access the site, or you encounter technical glitches, and by you I mean the students, or you if you have to fill out the FAFSA yourself, try again later. If the form is down for maintenance, check the banner for when it will be back up. In the event of high traffic, you might be placed in a virtual waiting room. If this happens to you, please wait for the website to admit you and allow you to access the form. Don't leave the website and come back, because you might lose your place in line. So additional updates. Colleges and state agencies will not receive FAFSA information from submitted forms until later this month. With colleges not receiving FAFSA data until later this month, it's expected that students will not begin to receive any financial aid offers until late February or March at the earliest. FAFSA filers, anyone who submitted their form or will be submitting their form shortly, will need to wait until the end of January to receive their FAFSA submission summary. This summarizes all the information that's submitted on the form. You see here a screenshot of what it would look like. When FAFSA filers receive their FAFSA submission summary, that's when they'll be able to make a correction to any data that they might have input incorrectly. So you can see here I've highlighted the make a correction button. So at this point, no one's received a FAFSA submission summary. They're going to be sent out for those process forms sometime at the end of January. The specific date in January, we have a week left. We still don't know yet. hopefully it will be sometime later this month. So the Office of Federal Student Aid, FSA, has released a list of issues they are working to resolve with the 24-25 FAFSA. Each issue has a status. As you can see here, this is a screenshot of one issue, has a status, a description, and a proposed solution if one is available. So this is from the FAFSA issue alerts page. I'm going to be sending you a link and a follow-up email to this page so that you have that. At this point, there are more open issues, the resolved issues. I think there are currently 3 resolved issues. You can see here, this particular issue has been on this page since January 4th. We're now January 24th, so 20 days later, it still hasn't been resolved. And there are more issues that people are encountering than are being reported on this page. So just to give you an example, a lot of people are running into a problem where either the parent or the student submits a FAFSA application without both of them signing it. This results in an email saying that the application lacks signatures, which can affect financial aid eligibility. In this case, the fix is coming soon, hopefully later this month when the FAFSA submission summary is sent out. As we saw earlier, there will be a make a corrections feature available, and it will allow people to correct their application, make sure both signatures are there, and correct any other mistakes that they might have made. Another issue has to do with students not being able to invite contributors. So we've heard a possible workaround for this, which is to put the parent information in all caps. Don't ask me why that would work, but that's a possible solution we've heard. It's an option your students can try. A second option is for students to delete their application in the settings menu and start a new application. That might work if their old application has a bug that hasn't been fixed and the new application has been that has had that bug fixed. So you would do that. The settings menu is in the upper right-hand corner of the form. You would click on that, and then there would be an option to delete existing application. So if you have an issue, if your students have an issue, you can check to see if yours is listed on the FAFSA issue alerts page. If it's not, then you can contact, or your students can contact Student Aid's helpline, see if they can get further guidance. And that information is listed on the next page. And we'll also be sending a link and a follow-up email directly to that will take you directly to the information center. So this information center is for parents and students, for help with the FAFSA form and the process, and for help with any issues regarding the FSA ID. Note that the contact center can discuss FSA ID issues only with the account holder. So if you have a student who's having, let's say, a parent having trouble creating their FSA ID, that parent would actually need to get on the call with the representative. Customer service representatives should be providing assistance not only in English, in Spanish as well, and other languages. But as you can imagine, they've been very, very busy. There have been reports that students are getting hung up on after waiting a long time when they call the information center. Unfortunately, this is the information we have on how to contact them or to get help. So if you can, or if your students can, try reaching out during non-peak hours, maybe first thing in the morning if that's possible. And then there are different options, besides phone call, there's live chat and email. I mean, I personally prefer live chat because I always like to make a screenshot of what's been written in the chat. But any way that you can reach them, good luck. Unfortunately, this is what we have on how to reach a federal student aid. Now let's talk about the FSA ID, which I've mentioned before. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, essentially it's your username and password for your studentaid.gov account that serves as your legal signature when signing and submitting the FAFSA. So all contributors require an FSA ID. The student is always a contributor on their own FAFSA. Dependent students, in most cases, will need at least one parent to be a contributor, depending on marital and tax filing status. To create an FSA ID, you would go to studentaid.gov. You see here the screenshot where it says create account. You would click on get started, and then go ahead and fill out the information to create that username and password. one thing I do want to note is that you need to enter your name exactly as it appears on your social security card. That information is given there with the help icon, but if you don't click on it, you might not see that it needs to, the name needs to appear exactly, or you need to put in your name exactly as it appears on your social security card. So you might, want to reference that actual card and see the way your name appears. If it's a parent who might have changed their name due to marriage, you're gonna have to enter it exactly as it appears on the social security card and then fix that later. FSA IDs will need to be authenticated with the Social Security Administration, so usually takes 1 to 3 days for an FSA ID to be verified. So we recommend students and parents create FSA IDs at least 3 days before completing the FAFSA. Parents without social security numbers will also need to create FSA IDs. So, for example, undocumented parents of students applying for aid. We're going to get to that in the next slide. There are a lot of issues with that. There have been some problems when it comes to creating FSA IDs, not only for people without social security numbers, but also for people with social security numbers. Although I believe the issue affecting users with social security numbers has been solved. Some of these problems are detailed on the issue alerts page, which we saw earlier. One other thing I want to mention with regards to the FSA ID, many people have reported not receiving an email that their account has been verified. So if your FSA ID still hasn't been verified after 4 days, then I would encourage you to log into your FSA ID account, go to the settings page. There you can check to see if there's been a match with your FSA ID and the Social Security Administration. Now moving on to the hot topic, probably for many of you, parents without social security numbers. Again, for example, undocumented parents of students applying for aid. So this is how the process works, or was supposed to work. Contributors without social security numbers would have the option to answer 1 to 4 knowledge-based verification questions generated by TransUnion, one of the 3 major credit bureaus. If they answered those questions successfully, they would only have 1 chance to do so. But if they did, the FSA ID would be authenticated and available to use immediately. For those unable to successfully answer those knowledge-based identity questions, a manual documentation process would then be made available. That process, let me explain to you what that process looks like. FSA, again, Federal Student Aid, is enabled to verify their information. Then they would have to contact the FSA ID, FSA Information Center at the number which we saw previously. The individual would receive an email from FSA informing them to call the Information Center for next steps and to verify their identity. Once the individual contacts the Information Center, then FSA would create a case number, send them a verification email, which will include guidance on how to submit copies of acceptable documentation to verify their identity. And you see some of those acceptable documents to prove identity. Individuals will also be required to submit an attestation form along with their approved identity documentation. You see the first page of this form here. It's 4 pages long. This form is available on the studentaid.gov website, but we'll be sending you a link to this in a follow-up email. Currently, the form is available only in English, but should be available in Spanish by February 5th. FSA will review an individual's submitted documentation and signed form, and if there's a successful match, the individual will receive an email indicating their identity has been verified and that they may now use their FSA ID to log in and complete the FAFSA. But that's the way the process for non-Social Security FSA IDs should have worked. But there have been many issues. As I just went through, the plan was for users to answer questions during the account creation process. They couldn't answer these questions correctly, then they would provide additional documentation for identity verification. However, what's been happening is that almost everyone trying to create an account without a Social Security number is being directed to go through the manual process, which is most likely because if TransUnion has no information on that person, the TransUnion can't generate those questions to verify their identity. So then they have to call the Federal Student Aid Information Center, which is proving to be very challenging due to high call volumes, and even for those individuals without Social Security numbers who do get an account, none of them, as I understand, none of them have been able to complete the application. And FSA, unfortunately, the Information Center has been giving out a wide variety of responses regarding this issue, including they have no idea how to help you. So this problem is detailed on the issue alerts page. As you see here, it was added on January 4th. As you can see here, it's still open, an open issue and hasn't been resolved. Unfortunately, there's currently no workaround for a parent without a social security number. I'm just reading what it says here. A student may start the application, but the parent will not be able to contribute the parent information. The student and parent will be able to complete the 24-25 FAFSA form online once the issue is resolved. So FSA knows it's a problem. They're working on it, but unfortunately, there's currently no known timeline for resolving this issue. That's the latest news. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest news, but that is the latest news. We recommend that students document their attempts to complete the application in case they need to prove to their college's financial aid office or scholarship organization, whoever they need to send a FAFSA to, that they did try to complete it several times and could not. They might want to take screenshots, that include the error message, the URL, the system clock showing the date and time on the corner. If they contact FSA, the Information Center or their college's financial aid office to keep a record of those emails, if they make phone calls for help, to note the date, time, and the name of the person they spoke to, or even make a screenshot of the call log. That's fortunately, this is a big issue and there's no known timeline, but FSA is working on it. So that's the bright spot. So there's a question: what if a person completed the old FAFSA? Well, if a person currently has an FSA ID from previous years, they don't need to create a new one. They can use that existing one. So there's no need to create a new one. They might need to verify their email address if they didn't verify with the old FSA ID, but there's no reason to create a new one. Now, for the first time for this new FAFSA, the 24-25, contributors without a social security number will or should have been able to create an FSA ID. Previous years, that wasn't the case. So the issue is, since that's a new process, that's giving a lot of problems. So now we're going to look at starting the FAFSA from the viewpoint of a dependent student, just for simplicity and given the short time that we have. So students will see 5 sections in the student section: personal circumstances, demographics, financials, colleges, and signature. So we're going to focus on the first 3 sections, again, based on the scenario that the student is a dependent student. So for personal circumstances, this section helps determine a student's dependency status. So I think maybe this is the first question, but again, we're going to only look at selected questions, not all the questions. So the student is asked about their current marital status. So note that if a student is married, they're considered independent. So they would not be dependent. But again, we're assuming we're a dependent student. And so we would select the single never married option. But of course, if a student is married, they would select married and they would be considered independent. Then the student is asked about their college grade level for the 24-25 school year, and if they will have their first bachelor's degree. So these questions are important as they can help determine the grant and loan eligibility, depending on what year the student is in college. So we want to make sure that the student selects the right option here for what their college grade level will be. If the student hasn't attended college before, they will be a first-year freshman student and will not yet have a bachelor's degree. So you answer freshman here and no. Then the next question has to do with personal circumstances. The student is asked if any of the listed personal circumstances apply to them. Note that if the student answers yes to any one of these questions, they're going to be considered an independent student. But again, we're looking at it assuming we're a dependent student. And so we would select the none of these apply option. And you see that once that option is selected, all the other options are grayed out. The next section has to do with other circumstances. So the student is asked if at any time on or after July 1st, 2023, was a student unaccompanied and either homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So if the student answers yes to this question, and they don't have a determination from an individual at an eligible agency, they're considered to be an independent student and will not be required to provide information about their parents on the FAFSA form. They'll be considered provisionally independent and be given a provisional student aid index, but they will need to provide supporting documentation to their school's financial aid office. So the next question has to do with unusual circumstances. So we had other circumstances. Now we're on to unusual circumstances. So the student is asked, did you experience any unusual circumstances that prevent you from contacting your parents? So there are several options listed here. If the student does have an unusual circumstance and selects yes, then it's similar to the scenario we saw before about homelessness. The student will not have to provide parental information on the FAFSA. They'll be given a provisional student aid index and provisional independent student status, but they will need to provide a supporting documentation to their school's financial aid office. Now, there was a question submitted prior to the webinar about a student from one of the, I'm not sure if that person is here attending, but a question about a student who's a refugee from Ukraine with parents in the Ukraine. So one of these unusual circumstances, just to answer your question in case you're here, the third option does include if a student's parents are displaced in a foreign country. So in this student's case with parents in the Ukraine, then the student would be able to select yes to this question because that's considered an unusual circumstance. Note that a parent who refuses to contribute to your educational expenses or a parent who will not provide information for the FAFSA does not qualify as an unusual circumstance. But again, we're looking at this from a dependent student scenario, so the student would select no. And I'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. Be happy to answer them. Then this page here, the student will see their dependency status and is expected. The student is deemed to be a dependent student based on the answers provided to the questions. Again, we pretended we were a dependent student, but if the student is an independent student, then they would be deemed to be independent. So here, this is a question that has tripped up a lot of students, not because of any fault of the student, but because it's not well worded. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on this question. So the student is asked, are the student's parents unwilling to provide their information, but the student doesn't have an unusual circumstance that prevents them from contacting or obtaining their parents' information? So if you are considered independent, you might see here, hopefully the print is too small. If you're considered independent, then you will need to provide parental information. But if your parents are unwilling to complete their section of the FAFSA, you can opt out of including parent information and apply, as it says here, for a direct unsubsidized loan only. So if you would have been eligible for a grant or a subsidized loan or additional aid, you won't be eligible unless federal student aid receives information about your parent or parents. So a student should select yes only if their parents are unwilling to provide their financial information, otherwise select no. So if students are considering, and so the trip up students have inadvertently selected yes, they didn't read the question carefully, again, because it's poorly worded, and they selected no, and then they weren't able to go back and fix it. They'll have to wait until the FAFSA submission summary comes out. So select yes only if your parents are unwilling to provide their financial information. So if students are considering selecting yes, then they should think about this first. If they select yes, they will now receive a student aid index. I probably should have mentioned at the beginning, but the student aid index, or SAI, is an index number that determines eligibility for need-based financial aid, and this number results from the information that the student provides in the FAFSA. So some state or school-based aid programs, many, look at the student aid index in order to determine a student's eligibility for their funds. Because the student will have selected yes here, they won't have an SAI. They won't be considered for those financial aid programs, in addition to not being eligible for federal financial aid apart from the direct unsubsidized loan only. So, students could be given up a chance at many sources of financial aid. So I would, if you're an advisor or a counselor, I encourage your students to encourage their parents to provide this information, because doing so won't require parents to support their students in any way. By contributor, they're just contributing their financial information, their personal information. So the Department of Education can determine a student's eligibility, but they're not obligated in any way to actually contribute to the student's education. And the FAFSA form clearly states that they are not financially responsible for the student's education. So again, please have your students read this question carefully and select yes only, really as a last resort if their parents are unwilling to provide their information. So the next question has to do with ask several questions about the student's parents to determine who should be invited to provide information on their FAFSA form. The FAFSA will guide the students through a series of filtering questions to help them determine who to report as their parent on the FAFSA. These yes/no questions that students will encounter on the online form are also the same ones that appear on this infographic, which I've shared on previous webinars. I'm not going to go into all the questions here, but the questions are your parents married to each other? Do your parents live together? Did one parent provide more financial support than the other over the past 12 months? So students simply have to follow the flow chart, answer yes or no, and the form will tell them which parent or parent needs to be a contributor depending on marital status and tax filing status. So we will be sending a link to this form so that you can share with your students if they want to know who's going to be a contributor before they actually start filling out the FAFSA form. So to invite parents to the FAFSA form, then students will need the following details: full legal name, date of birth, social security number if they have one. If not, they would select this option here. My parent doesn't have a social security number. And if your parent doesn't have a social security number, you also need to provide their mailing address. So it is critical that the student enter their parents' information exactly as it appears in the parent's FSA ID. The one exception is that the email address provided for contributors does not need to match the one used for the FSA ID. But given all the issues that are having, I would play it on the safe side and make sure that everything matches. For students with parents without a social security number, it is critical that the mailing address match exactly the mailing address that the parent is using when they create an FSA ID. So again, a recommendation is if a student has not filled out the FAFSA, to talk through those parent wizard questions we saw on the infographic that we'll be sending you before starting the FAFSA, in case they need to have any conversations about paying for college. So the next section in the student section is demographics. This question, again, we're not going to review all the questions, just the ones that require a little bit more explanation. So this question is very important. The student is asked about their citizenship status. So if you're a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, you are eligible for federal financial aid. Students who select eligible non-citizen should include their A number if they have one. If you're neither a U.S. citizen nor an eligible non-citizen, then you're not eligible for federal financial aid, but state or institutional aid might be available. There is a student should answer this question carefully. There is an open issue identified on the issue alerts page that if a student who is a citizen initially selects eligible non-citizen by mistake, the student is prevented from completing the form even after the student changes the citizenship status response to U.S. citizen or national. That's still an open issue. So please have your students look at this question carefully and answer select the right option. Another issue that people are encountering is that if an eligible non-citizen has an A number that ends in 0, the system will not save the application and will not submit. I don't know if that issue has been resolved or not. Again, just briefly touching on eligible non-citizen, which is the second option here. So again, as I mentioned, there was a question submitted prior to the webinar about a student who's a refugee from the Ukraine. So you are considered an eligible non-citizen if you fall into certain categories. So this is category number 2, which I'm going to highlight in response to this question. So here you will see that Ukrainian citizens and nationals who were granted permission to enter the United States between February 24th, 2022 and September 30th, 2023 do fall into one of the categories of eligible non-citizens. So I just wanted to answer that question since it was asked prior to the webinar. So the third section we're going to look at, and I know we're moving quickly here, is financials. Every contributor has to consent and approve to having the IRS share your federal tax information with federal student aid in order to complete the FAFSA. Because of this, most of the that federal tax information will be transferred electronically, and most of the income and tax questions will be answered automatically. Therefore, students, when asked questions about their 2022 tax return, they're going to see only a limited number of tax questions. So again, you see there are only a handful of questions which require a response in each field. So if the number is 0, you actually have to enter 0. You can't leave a blank. Students are also asked about their assets, the current value, so the day they're filling out the FAFSA. For many students, again, these amounts will be very low or 0. Again, if it's 0, you actually have to enter 0 and not leave a blank. And then further instructions are given here, as you see. So now we're going to look at starting the FAFSA from the viewpoint of the parent or parents of a dependent student. Again, looking only at a limited number of questions. So on the left, you can see the email invitation that a parent will see once the student has invited them. So parents will want to check their email to find the invitation. The email is going to have the parent's name. We'll let them know that their student can't be eligible for federal student aid without their input. So a parent would be able to was able to log in simply by clicking on this button on the email, and that they'll be sent directly to the website where they're going to enter their username and password, and they can fill out the form. If parents don't receive an email, they might want to double check that the email has not been sent to spam or the junk folder, or confirm with their student which email address the invitation was sent to. Or parents can go directly to the studentaid.gov website and log in with their FSA ID. They will check their My Activity dashboard for the invitation. As you can see here, if there's an invitation there waiting for them, it will appear here. They can select invitation or accept invitation and get started, begin filling out the section. So if parents don't see, the student has said they invited them, they don't see the invitation to be a contributor, either they don't get the email or it's not on their dashboard, they should ask their student to log back into their FAFSA and make sure that the student inputted their name, date of birth, social security number if applicable, and an email address correctly. So now we move on to the parent section of the application. So we're almost done. The parent portion, as you can see, is much shorter than the student section, has only 3 sections: demographics, financials, and signature. So we're going to focus quickly on the financial section, which is where the major differences are from previous year's FAFSAs. So the parent, in this question, the parent is asked if they or anyone in their family has received federal benefits at any time during 2022 or 2023. So if families select any one of these options, then they are not required to report assets. So we do want to highlight the third benefit here, which is free or reduced price school lunch. So there are a lot of districts around the country that have universal free and reduced price school lunch for students in their school district, regardless of income. Federal Student Aid released updated guidance earlier this month for answering this question. So this question is important because those who indicate in the previous question that we saw that they received free or reduced price lunch are not required to answer questions about financial assets. For families with income under $60,000, this updated guidance has no effect, as they would not have been required to report assets on the FAFSA anyway. But the updated guidance does say that families should check the box indicating free and reduced price lunch only if they meet the USDA income eligibility guidelines for receiving free and reduced price lunch. Previous guidance from federal student aid instructed anyone who received the benefit to check the box. So essentially, the government recognized that their guidance wasn't very clear. There was a loophole, and now they provided further guidance. So we will be sending you a link to these income eligibility guidelines in the follow-up email tomorrow. Next question has to do with family size. The parent is asked if their family size has changed. So the FAFSA uses the number of individuals claimed on the tax return as the assumed family size. If the family size is different from the tax return, there is the option to manually report the family size. So a common reason that the family size might be different than the tax return is due to a birth of a child. Again, for the 24-25 FAFSA, tax return information from 2022 is being used. So then a child might have been born since the tax return was filed, or another reason that the family size might be different is because of a divorce arrangement. So students and contributors are not able to view or edit their federal tax information that's been transferred from the IRS electronically because of security and privacy issues. So they're not able to see the family size that the FAFSA is pulling, that number that the FAFSA is pulling, but they can check the number of exemptions that they claimed on the tax return. So if the number of exemptions claimed on the tax return doesn't match all the individuals the parents are actually supporting in their household, then they can adjust the family size in the previous question that we saw. They can adjust it here. Per the instructions here given, families can add the number of children or other dependents who live with the parent and will receive more than half of their support from the parent during the award year. Again, those instructions are given on the form. So this page asks the parent how many people in the family will be in college during the award year. So per the instructions, do not include any parents who are in college. But here the student is always included in the number in college, so it's always at least one. Also included are those in the family size who are or will be enrolled at least half-time during the award year. As you can see here, the number in college no longer affects federal financial eligibility, but schools can use information if they want to determine institutional aid, their own funds. So just like in the student section, if you consent and approve to having your federal tax information transferred, you're only going to see a limited number of income and tax questions, and you would need to provide a response in each field. Then the next question has to do, just like in the student section, has to do with assets. But you will see here that child support received is included as an asset, not as income. So this information needs to be reported only if assets are required to be reported. So families with an adjusted gross income of less than $60,000 generally will not be required to report assets on the FAFSA. So there could be families who receive child support, but if their income is less than $60,000, and they're not presented with the asset section of the form, then they don't have to answer the child support question. If they are required to answer asset questions, then they will see the child support question on the form, and they'll need to report the amount that they received for the last complete calendar year. So it indicates here the last complete calendar year. So if they're completing this form this year in 2024, they're going to be reporting the amount of child support that was received for 2023. So if the dependent student's parent received child support, they should enter the total amount received for all children in the family size in this question. And of course, other assets similar to the student, cash savings, checking, all businesses, farms, and investments. So that's it. Let me go now over quickly the links that we're going to be sending you in the follow-up email tomorrow with additional tools and resources that you can use. So the first one is simply a link to the Federal Student Aid website, which has lots of information in detail with a lot of the information available in Spanish as well. The link to the Federal Student Aid Information Center, the direct link to that page with the hours of operation and the ways in which you can contact the information center. This is the direct link to the page within the StudentAid.gov website for resources about completing the 2024 2024-25 FAFSA form. The infographic we saw earlier is my parent a contributor when I fill out my FAFSA form. Income eligibility guidelines that determine whether you can check the free and reduced price school lunch option. A federal student aid handbook, which is a guide intended for college financial aid administrators and counselors who help students with the financial aid process. Now, when students and families fill out the online FAFSA form, they, there are instructions and help in completing the form, but this guide has additional information and examples that might be useful, again, for counselors and advisors helping students. The issue alerts page, which I mentioned, that has open and resolved issues regarding the FAFSA. Again, not all of them, but the ones that they have listed here. The attestation form that parents without Social Security numbers might need to fill out to obtain that FSA ID. Currently, the form is available only in English, so this link is only for the English form, since the Spanish form won't be coming out until early next month. A checklist of documents that people might need to fill out the FAFSA. Again, if you consent and approve to having your federal tax information transferred, most of the income and tax questions will be, filled in automatically. But if you need, for example, to answer the asset questions, you need to know how much money you have in your savings account. You'll need that bank statement. So this checklist has those types of forms that you might need. Wyatt, which is a free chatbot available on demand 24/7 for students and families to text their FAFSA questions and receive immediate answers. So we don't have any direct experience with Wyatt, but it is recommended by the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. So this link that we'll be sending you is a link to educator-specific resources for Wyatt so that you can talk to your students about this free resource. And finally, a link to the paper forms, the paper FAFSAs in both English and Spanish. So just a few words about the paper FAFSA. It is 22 pages long. Some folks might be thinking, about going the paper route for the FAFSA, especially if they've been struggling with the online application or have limited access to internet. If you have students facing a tight FAFSA deadline, submitting a paper FAFSA might be the quickest option because federal student aid has not given a timeline for how soon they're going to have some of these glitches fixed. When you submit a paper FAFSA, usually the receive date will be the date it's received at federal student aid, regardless of when it's processed. But students should confirm that in writing with their college's financial aid office, the scholarship organization, whoever needs to have that FAFSA, to see if that's the case. However, if people don't have any immediate deadline pressure, even though we recommend filling out the FAFSA as soon as possible, because of all the technical glitches, you might want to wait a week or two to see if those glitches can be resolved. So the paper FAFSA also has its own identity verification process. Fortunately, we don't have all the details on what that process entails. And just one last word about the paper FAFSA. Paper FAFSA applications won't start getting processed until February. So even if you pop it in the mail today, it's not going to start getting worked on until sometime in February. So, each family has to make the decision for themselves as to which is the better option, the paper FAFSA or the online FAFSA. So that's it. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. Please stay engaged with us, follow us on social, read our blogs for tips and tricks. There are a couple of blogs on the FAFSA that has just come out. Come to our free events such as this one. Just a quick word about upcoming free events that you can sign up on our website. We have a great program coming up on February 6th where we're going to talk about pre-college programs that can give students a head start in their journey to college. So we'll be talking about the benefits of these programs. And we're going to be looking at 2 exceptional pre-college programs in depth that are free. Please read the flyer on the website. We are going to have 2 amazing guest speakers, personally spoken to them, and they're excited about sharing There are programs with students, so please encourage your students to apply if they're or to register for the webinar if they're interested. And finally, in March, we'll have an event on standardized testing on students, how they can plan and prepare for the SAT and ACT. So, and last but not least, our upcoming free major and career fair on Saturday, March 16th, which will give students an opportunity to connect with the professors and professionals to learn about possible majors and careers, and registration is now open for that too on our website. So thank you very much for joining today, and now I'd be happy, hopefully I can answer your questions. I'm going to stop sharing.